You ever meet someone so entitled you start questioning whether the universe accidentally handed them a crown at birth? That's Karen Thompson, president of our local HOA, queen of the cul-de-sac, and self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. And I swear, if arrogance had a national flag, she'd be the one saluting it at sunrise. The whole mess started one perfect Saturday morning. Sun cutting through the fog, water rippling like glass across Eagles Point Lake. My lake. Well, technically, my property. But as Karen would later scream, community property, like it was a divine commandment carved in stone. I bought my place 3 years ago, 5 acres at the edge of the neighborhood, tucked just past the tree line. My grandfather left me a trust when he passed, and I used it to buy a slice of quiet heaven. A log cabin, a small pier, and that fishing lake. It wasn't just any pond. My grandfather dug it himself back in the 70s, stocked it, and paid taxes on every inch of it ever since. The property line, marked by old oak stakes and, later, shiny metal posts, made it clear the lake belonged entirely to my lot. The HOA even had the surveyor's maps filed in their own records. But facts never got in the way of Karen's crusades. At first, we were civil. I waved when I saw her walking her schnauzer, Pippin. She'd wave back, tight-lipped. Once, she even brought over cookies, store-bought, of course, and mentioned how beautiful my lake looked from her patio. That's when she first asked, would you ever consider opening it up for neighborhood use? I smiled, polite but firm. No, it's private property. Liability's a nightmare, you know? She laughed, but her eyes didn't. Oh, of course. Just asking. And that was the first red flag I ignored. Fast forward to last spring. I'd been working long hours remotely, barely stepping outside. Saturday rolls around, and I finally have a chance to relax, grab a cold beer, cast a line, and listen to the wind slide across the water. Then I hear music. Not the kind that drifts softly through trees, the kind that thumps. Bass, shouting, splashes, laughter. I walk around the curve of the lake, and there they are, a full-blown party. 20 or 30 people, kids running, beer coolers open, and a massive banner flapping in the breeze. HOA Community Picnic. Right on my shoreline. I froze. A guy I'd never met was reeling in a fish with my tackle hook. My hook, as if it were public equipment. Karen was standing under a canopy, clipboard in hand, directing people where to set up chairs like she was hosting Coachella. I marched up to her, my boots crunching the gravel. Karen, I said, trying to stay calm. What the hell is going on? She turned, sunglasses sliding down her nose. Oh, hey, John. We're just using the lake for our annual HOA event. We assumed it was part of the common area. I took a breath. It's not. It's my land. My private lake. Karen smiled that sugar-sweet, condescending smile people use when they think they've already won. Oh, sweetheart, I think you're mistaken. The community charter says all natural water features are shared amenities. Read the plat maps, I said. It's man-made. My grandfather built it. It's literally named after him, Reed's Pond. Her smile faltered for a second before snapping back. Well, we'll just have to sort that out later. Everyone's already here, so... That's when she waved to her guests. Don't worry, folks. You're welcome to stay. It's community property. I saw red. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just walked back to my cabin, pulled out my phone, and called the sheriff's department. By the time the deputy rolled up, people were already starting to whisper. Karen had noticed the cruiser lights flickering through the trees, and her face turned the color of expired mayonnaise. The deputy, a calm older guy named Lewis, asked me a few questions, then looked at the property map. His eyebrows went up. He said to Karen, this is clearly private land. The lake's within Mr. Reed's boundaries. Karen crossed her arms. That can't be right. The HOA maintains all community assets. Lewis tilted his head. Do you maintain it? Pay taxes on it. She blinked. Well, no, but... Then it's trespassing. I'm going to need everyone to clear out. The murmurs started immediately. People folding chairs, dumping drinks. Shooting me dirty looks like I just ruined Christmas. Karen stood still, jaw tight, as if sheer willpower could bend reality. When the last car pulled away, I stood beside the dock, staring at the trash floating near the edge. Plastic cups, chip bags, cigarette butts. My sanctuary, trashed in a single afternoon. That's when I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next week, I started noticing strange things. A letter from the HOA demanding that I remove the unsightly fencing obstructing community access to Eagles Point Lake. Then a $500 fine for noncompliance with HOA landscaping standards. I hadn't changed a single thing. Then came the visitors, families wandering down my trail to walk by the lake. When I asked where they were going, they'd say, "Karen told us it's open to everyone now." That was when the anger turned into something colder, something sharper. I installed new no trespassing signs, added a chain across the trail, and filed a formal complaint with the county. I even printed copies of the original survey map and mailed them to every HOA board member. Karen responded by sending another letter, this one threatening legal action for restricting community amenities. It was like arguing with a brick wall that wore perfume and had a Facebook group. One evening, I came home to find tire tracks cutting through the grass near the lake's edge. The padlock on my gate snapped clean off, and there, in the middle of my dock, was a folding chair, an empty wine bottle, and Karen's little schnauzer's leash. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about property anymore. This was about control. Karen wanted to make a statement. She ruled the neighborhood, and no one, not even the guy with the deed in his hands, could challenge her. But she made one mistake. She underestimated how far I go when someone disrespected my grandfather's legacy. So I started digging. Deep. I began attending HOA meetings, quiet, observant, blending in. Karen would glare at me every time I walked in, like I crashed her royal banquet. I learned a lot sitting in that back row. For example, Karen had been using HOA fund to pay for beautification projects that just happened to involve her own property. Garden lighting, fence repairs, even a new patio set. I took photos of receipts when the treasurer left the folder unattended. Screenshot financial reports she posted online. Every thread, every little inconsistency. I gathered it all. And when I found out she'd been pressuring other homeowners into donating extra fees for her personal events, I knew exactly how to use it. A month later, the HOA announced its annual election meeting. Karen, of course, was running unopposed. Again, that's when I made my move. I sent out anonymous flyers to every homeowner in the community. Is your HOA president using your money for her backyard parties? Details inside. Attend the meeting this Thursday to find out the truth. By the time Thursday came, the clubhouse parking lot was packed. People buzzed with curiosity and suspicion. Karen strutted in wearing a bright red blazer and her trademark "I'm in charge" smile. But I wasn't there to talk. Not yet. I wanted her to feel the ground shift before she realized she was falling. The meeting began. Karen launched into her speech about unity, community spirit, and responsibility. Her voice was syrupy sweet, rehearsed perfection. Then someone, an older man named Rick from 3 streets over, stood up and asked, "Karen, what's this about you using HOA money for your own property expenses?" The room went dead silent. Karen blinked. "Excuse me." Rick held up one of the flyers. "This says you've been misusing funds. Is that true?" She laughed, high-pitched and nervous. "That's ridiculous. Who would even say such a thing?" That's when I stepped out from the back of the room, holding a folder thick with copies of receipts, screenshots, and emails. Her face drained of color. And that's where the real story begins. Because revenge, it isn't about shouting or fighting. It's about waiting until your enemy builds their own pedestal, and then handing them the rope. But here's the question that still keeps me up at night. When you finally get even, when justice feels as good, does that make you any better than them? When Karen saw me holding that thick folder of proof, her fake smile cracked like thin ice under a heavy boot. The room filled with a low hum of whispers, neighbors turning, heads swiveling between us. The HOA meeting, usually a dull routine of landscaping budgets and pool maintenance, had suddenly turned into a courtroom drama. I didn't say a word at first. I just laid the folder on the table in front of her with deliberate calm. The slap of paper on wood echoed through the clubhouse. You might want to look through that, I said, voice steady, almost gentle. Karen laughed, a brittle sound. John, this is absurd. You're trespassing at a private HOA meeting. Rick, the man who'd spoken up, frowned. He's a homeowner. He's allowed to be here. That was the first crack in her control. I turned toward the group. I have receipts, digital transfers, and even HOA emails showing that Mrs. Thompson used association funds for her own property improvements. Lighting, fencing, lawn services, even catering for her private parties, all billed under community beautification. Someone in the back muttered, "You're kidding me." I flipped open the first page. Here's an invoice from Brightscape Landscaping, $2,400, paid by HOA funds, addressed directly to her home. I let that hang in the air a moment. And this one, $1,800 for a water feature restoration. Only there's no water feature in the community except my lake. Karen snatched the papers, eyes darting over them. These are misinterpreted. Everything I've done was for community benefit. Community benefit, I repeated, like hosting a private HOA board retreat at your lake house? The same one you broke into 2 months ago. The room went utterly still. Even Pippin, her schnauzer waiting by the door, stopped panting. Karen's face twisted. That's not true. You can't prove that. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. One tap, and the screen lit up with a grainy video, night vision footage from the trail camera I'd installed by the dock. The image was clear enough. Karen and 2 of her friends dragging coolers across the grass, laughing as they set up chairs on my pier. The room erupted. Voices rose. People gasped. Is that the night the gate was broken? Someone asked. She said it was vandalized. Another shouted. Karen stammered. This is taken out of context. Deputy Lewis, the same officer from that first confrontation, happened to be in the back of the room. He'd come at my request, just in case things got heated. Now he stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He said calmly, breaking a locked gate and entering private property without permission, that's trespassing. If this video is accurate, that's a criminal offense. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I turned to the neighbors. She's been fining me for imaginary violations while using your money for her personal gain. She trespassed, lied, and then tried to bully me into submission. A murmur rippled through the crowd, anger, betrayal, disbelief. For the first time, I saw doubt cloud the eyes of her loyal followers. The HOA treasurer, a quiet guy named Brian, stood up. I've seen those receipts. I thought they were legitimate expenses. He looked pale. Karen, you told me everything was approved by the board. Karen straightened her blazer, trying to gather herself. This is a smear campaign. He's bitter because he lost access to the community lake. The private lake, I corrected. Lewis cleared his throat. Folks, I think it's best we pause here. I'll be taking a formal statement. Karen shot me a look of pure venom. If looks could kill, I'd have dropped right there. But I just smiled. Because this was the moment she realized she'd lost control. The fallout came fast. Within a week, the HOA board voted to suspend Karen as president pending investigation. By the next month, she'd been forced to resign entirely. Word spread like wildfire across the neighborhood. People who'd once nodded eagerly at her commands now crossed the street to avoid her. The bright red blazer disappeared. Her daily walks with Pippin grew shorter and rarer. But it wasn't enough. Not for me. See, revenge is a strange flavor. You think it'll taste sweet, victory, vindication. But once you get a bite, it leaves something bitter on the tongue. I thought I'd be satisfied watching her crumble. But every time I looked at the lake, I saw the mess she'd left behind. The broken padlock, the empty bottles, the smug laughter that still echoed in my head. So I decided to make sure she never pulled something like this again. I started by finishing what I'd begun. I contacted the county zoning office and gave them everything: photos, maps, video, and proof of her HOA misuse. It turned out she'd also failed to get proper permits for the expensive renovations on her house, the same one she'd funded with HOA money. The county slapped her with fines totaling over $20,000. When the local paper picked up the story, HOA president resigns amid fund misuse allegations. Karen's name became neighborhood poison. Her friends stopped answering her calls. Her husband, a quiet man who rarely appeared at meetings, moved out within the month. And me? I just kept fishing. Every morning. Same spot on the dock, same mug of coffee. I'd see her once in a while, driving past slowly in her SUV, pretending not to look. Sometimes I'd tip my hat just to remind her I saw her too. But as the weeks passed, something started gnawing at me. It wasn't guilt exactly, more like emptiness. The storm had passed, the battle was won, yet I felt hollow. Was I really any different than her? Karen had wanted control. So did I. She'd used power to get her way. I'd used humiliation to take her down. Maybe she deserved it. But where did justice end and vengeance begin? That question haunted me, especially one quiet night when I was cleaning the dock. I found a small, weathered photo wedged under one of the boards, a picture of the lake from decades ago, back when it was still my grandfather's. The handwritten note on the back read, "Built with love, to be shared with peace." That hit me hard. The next morning, I walked to the end of the dock and just stood there, staring at the reflection of the trees. The water was still, calm, almost forgiving. Maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe the real revenge wasn't about tearing her down. It was about reclaiming what she'd taken, my peace. So I made a choice. I sent a letter to every neighbor in the community, short, polite, and unexpected. Dear neighbors, as many of you know, the lake on my property has been a point of conflict. I've decided to allow limited access for community members, by invitation only, and with a signed liability waiver. I ask for respect, honesty, and cooperation in return. It wasn't an olive branch for Karen. It was a message to everyone else, that I wasn't the enemy she'd painted me as. The response stunned me. People thanked me. A few even apologized for believing her lies. Slowly, the community shifted. We held small cleanup days, fixed a walking path, and even built a new sign. Reed's Lake, private access by permission. And for the first time in months, the lake felt alive again. Karen, of course, wasn't invited. But one evening, just before sunset, I saw her standing by the road, staring down at the water. She looked smaller somehow. Defeated, yes, but also lost. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She caught my eye, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The air was thick with everything unspoken, anger, pride, regret. Then she nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and walked away. That tiny gesture felt like closure. Months passed. The HOA elected a new president, Rick, of all people. He was fair, calm, and reasonable. The meetings went back to being boring, which was exactly how everyone liked them. The fines disappeared. The letters stopped. Peace settled over the neighborhood like dust after a storm. But every so often, when the light hits the lake just right, I think about how close I came to becoming the very thing I despised. Karen had flipped out when I blocked her guests, screamed community property, like a war cry, and turned a peaceful life into a battlefield. And I'd fought back, hard, too hard, maybe. Revenge gave me justice, but it also made me see how thin that line really is between right and ruin. So now, when I sit on the dock, I don't think about Karen's downfall. I think about my grandfather, and that note, built with love, to be shared with peace. The lake glimmers, still and quiet, the way it used to, and maybe, in the end, that's all the revenge I ever really needed. Because while Karen lost her power, I found something better. I found my peace again.